Magick.me is the world's greatest school for magic, meditation, and mysticism. You can learn everything there, from chaos magic to hermeticism to meditation to how to supercharge your finances and take absolute control of your destiny. In short, you get all of the tools you need to turn chaos into beautiful, scintillating order and master your life. It's incredible. You've probably heard me talk about it on the show quite a lot. But check it out. It's growing fast. And I just want to say, if you're confused about where to start, because I have so many courses there, the Adept Initiative is the place to go. The Adept Initiative is the flagship course on Magick.me, and it contains everything you need to know to master the most profound ancient techniques of changing your consciousness and the most modern and cutting-edge tools and systems for absolutely turning your life into a masterpiece. You're really going to dig it. Go check it out, and I will see you in class. It's magick.me, magick.me. Welcome to the podcast. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for being on. So why don't we start off? You want to tell people a little bit about yourself and your books and your work and what you be up to.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Gabriella, or Gabby on the social media sites. I am an author, a fashion alchemist, and a witch living in Los Angeles. I grew up in the Bible Belt and moved back to LA about 5 years ago and love it here. I'm the author of Inner Witch, a modern guide to the ancient craft, Bewitching the Elements, a guide to empowering yourself through earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. And most recently, Embody Your Magic, which is Embody Your Magic, a guided journal for the modern witch. My work really explores and dissects and weaves at the intersection of magic and glamour and the divine feminine and sexuality. And I write ritual guides for the full moon, the new moon, and the holidays of the witch that include things like, obviously, what's going on in the cosmos, affirmations, journal questions, tarot, Kabbalah, rituals, and a bunch of other fun things. Since quarantine started, I have started what I call Kink Coven, which is a ritual play party held every full moon. And we cast a spell of protection on sex workers around the world and then have a virtual play party where we raise energy for that working. I am a journalist, so my background is in fashion writing, but I've written for a bunch of different publications. Vogue International. I had a column with Nylon magazine called Ask a Witch. I kind of have a column with High Times magazine called The High Priestess, so that's kind of been on hiatus, and have written for Numinous and Allure, Cosmopolitan, Glamour, a bunch of other places about witchcraft and making magic accessible and relevant in your own life. So yeah, and I'm currently working on 2 books. One is on goddesses and working with the divine feminine. That will be out in fall of 2022. And also a book called Sacred Sex, which is all about the divine erotic, which will be out next summer. So yeah.
Super cool. So that's a lot. You've been busy. Your work is really interesting to me, and I've been watching. I've been kind of aware of it for a while on the periphery, and I definitely wanted to have you on the podcast because it seems like you're definitely a very strong new voice in the field. And I think that you're definitely, how do I put it, redefining magic in a non-cringe way. Like, you have a really good aesthetic with it.
Thank you. Wow. That's really sweet because I feel very cringe sometimes. So thank you.
Well, I am always cringe at all times. But definitely, I mean, like when I was growing up, everything was ridiculously mall goth. And so I think a lot of the stuff you've been doing has been very much bringing this material in a strong way to a new audience that maybe wouldn't have taken it, maybe wouldn't have looked at it previously. Has that been your experience?
Well, thank you for that compliment. I appreciate it. And yeah, I definitely feel that. I mean, I've definitely struggled with feeling kind of superficial about how important beauty and aesthetics are to me. But for me and for my magic, it's a way for me to touch the divine. And to me, it really is like the language of the universe, of goddess, of love. So I definitely think, it's important for me for the outer world to reflect my inner world. And what's even more important for me than that is really that magic isn't dogmatic and it's not something that people are afraid of. And that, with all my work, I really try to make it accessible to wherever somebody is. I think that's really, really important. There's a lot of gatekeeping, especially now with like witch talk and stuff. I feel like there's a lot of people who, get maybe a little bit overzealous about protecting, these, not secrets, but these magical, I don't know, just magic in general. And obviously there's definitely power in keeping things sub rosa, but I think that if somebody has this yearning and this craving and this desire to learn about magic, then that's invitation enough to do so. Like, I really think that magic is for everyone. If you're interested in it, if you're pulled toward it, then that's all you need to discover it. And just accessibility is so important for me. I don't want to feel like, I'm only talking to people who are like in the club. I think that if more people practice magic and if more people were in tune with their inner world and living from that place with integrity, then we would be living in a very different world, and one that I, want to live in. So
I totally agree. And yeah, I think gatekeeping really sucks. I mean, it sucks for anything. It's not necessarily just magic. It's anything that people are into. People like to gatekeep and be exclusionary. And I think that particularly with a subject like magic, which has such the potential to freak people out, and people can, and they usually do come up with their own story in their head about why they're scared and things like that. It really kind of, no pun, potentially pun possibly intentional. It really behooves us to be good ambassadors, I think. And I've been working at that for a while, but I totally agree.
Yeah. And I feel like also, I definitely, struggle is not the right word. I definitely don't really wear the title of teacher because I feel like I'm a forever student and I still have a lot to learn. But I think that, at least the way that I see it, like the best example I can give with magic is living it and being it and allowing it to, be the guiding force in my life. And I think people feel that, like at least I do. At least I think I can tell, when a teacher's being disingenuous or when somebody just talks a big game and isn't really walking the walk. And, I will never claim to know everything. Again, I feel like I will never stop learning, but I think that's, the seeker's path. But I just try to, lead from my own life, lead by example, and just, continue to learn and be honest about that and be very vulnerable and very authentic with the way that I share where I am, even if it feels cringe to do so sometimes.
Definitely not cringe. Well, what do you say? I mean, what you mentioned witch talk, which have just been informed about recently. I had no idea this existed. But whether it involves that or not, what are you seeing in interacting with people going out and speaking, and your readers, and maybe with younger people? I'm guessing there's a ton of interest at the moment.
With witch talk or with my work?
More with your work, I would say. I'm just using witch talk as an example of kind of taking the temperature of where the public is at. My perception, and has been for quite a while now, that it's just more and more. People are just more and more into it all the time, and there's more and more enthusiasm. So I was just kind of curious what your experience with that has been. Yeah,
I think it's definitely the same. I mean, I'm relatively speaking, I'm pretty new to this world, I guess, at least as a, quote unquote public figure. I use a lot of air quotes with that. I mean, I started writing about witchcraft, a long time after I began practicing, but it's probably only been around like 7 years. But I really started writing about it when, like, what I kind of call like the American Horror Story coven, like Urban Outfitters like trend was really picking up, where it was like you would see like everybody wanted to be witchy, but nobody really was like a witch yet. Like everybody was really into dressing like a witch, but I really do feel like that was kind of, at least in like the past decade, the entrance for a lot of people, because since then it's just, you know, if I had a penny for every time and somebody interviewing me was like, do you think this is just a trend? Like, why do you think people are turning to witchcraft? Like, do you think that it's gonna, like fizzle out? And I mean, which even if magic and the occult hasn't necessarily been in the public eye as much as it is now, like it's always there. And it's the same thing with the witch. The witch has always been there, even if she's hiding. But I definitely think that, at least since I've really been in this world and been writing, like it has not fizzled out. I feel the same way. I think that more people than ever are turning towards alternative spiritualities and just magic and modes of self-empowerment and self-sovereignty. And I mean, I get it, especially over the past year. Like I know from experience, like I cannot imagine raw dogging life through the pandemic. Like I do not know what I would have done without my daily practice. Like it really came through. And I feel like, that's why I'm so passionate about helping people find a system and a kind of magic that works for them, because it has to fit into your life. And when it does, and when it really aligns with who you are, then it's everything. And, I really feel like it's like once you taste the Kool-Aid, there's no going back. It's like once you, get that kind of sense of numinousness or, sanctity of the possibilities of life. Like, I don't know. I don't know if you could go back to normal. I mean, who was it? Doreen Virtue, is she the one that was doing all of those like oracle decks and then became a born again Christian? So I mean, it's possible, it's like you go to any extreme and then the pendulum's going to swing the other way. But yeah, I definitely feel like, I have, it's been really humbling. I have people every day reaching out to me about my books, and it feels like an immense privilege to share magic. It's something I don't take for granted at all. And it's something I'm very thankful for. So it's just glad to be here. Excited to see what comes in the next 5 years.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. One thing that I've been thinking about, and it's interesting you mentioned COVID. I was going to ask you if, what people have been coming to you with has changed during COVID, if people have changed approach. But something that I have been thinking about for a while, and actually I was thinking about it before COVID when people were talking about universal basic income a lot, is it was just clear to me even before the pandemic that there were going to be a lot of people out of work sitting at home with nothing to do. And that's potentially a really bad situation for mental health, but it's also a really good situation for spiritual practice, right? And in fact, something like spiritual practice, whether it's magical practice or something like that, something similar to that, could really be a lifeline for people. And I think that that's the experience I've had with my students during COVID. So I'm curious what you've been seeing in that regard.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I don't necessarily know if like the amount of people who are engaging with magic changes, just because like the way, like I don't, especially this past year, I really took a big break from like teaching classes and really have just been like, I pretty much nonstop been writing books since like last March, which has been great. But, amongst other things that I am doing, it's been a lot. So for me, it's really been, interacting with people like on social media is the main, and Patreon has been how I kind of am able to like, I guess, gauge that. And I definitely see how it's been helpful for people to have to have these practices. One thing that I started doing during COVID was that I like switched to doing some stuff donation based, and for my ritual guides, like if somebody can't afford it, they can email me and I'll send it to them, because I just like I know how powerful it is and how much of a lifeline it can be to, do breath work and journal and like all of these things that I talk about. Like I have firsthand experience of them being there for me through this past year. Like I've had multiple family health crises this past year. I've moved, COVID stuff. It's been, all of us have gone through a lot. And I definitely feel like people are really leaning into ritual and magic. I haven't really necessarily had, I've just really been, honestly, this past year, I've been hermetically sealed. I've really like taken a step back from teaching, took a step back from social media, like still posting, but really barely on there. So I mean, my engagement with everything's gone up. People are still engaging me with my work, but like, I just have not been, for my own, my own mental health reasons, haven't been like as, forward facing necessarily as, maybe I have been in the past. So this is a little bit more speculative, but I mean, just even talking to my community and the magical groups that I do ritual with, like, I've heard from them, like, how, we all agree how much of a lifeline it is to have one another, and how much a sense of community too has helped. I mean, for me too, has helped me through this whole thing. And then also my daily practice. So
Yeah. You mentioned breath work, and would you say that that is potentially one of the most powerful? It's just interesting to me that you immediately went straight to breath work and mentioned that. Is that maybe one of the most effective things that you found to get through this time?
oh my God. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Breath work is like I feel like I mean, at least I think it's super underrated. I mean, I maybe not so much in like my magical circle of, group friends, partners, that stuff, but I was somebody who never breathed. And in the span of a week, I had three people point that out. They're like, you don't breathe. And I was like, you know what? You're right. And this was right when I was really, really getting diligent with my daily practice about 3 years ago. And I set like literally 5 alarms a day at like different angel numbers. So like 5:55, 3:33, 2:22, just to breathe. So whenever those alarms would go off, I would breathe. And that literally trained me to breathe. And now it's something I do every single day, multiple times a day. And as somebody who is a very mental person, like my mind is always going, I'm always thinking. I'm a very fast person. I walk fast, I talk fast, I think fast, I do things fast. It's been one of the most effective things to calm me down, to connect my mind and my body, and especially even when I'm meditating. I mean, that's when I do a majority of my breath work. Obviously, I do it at other times too, but I feel like it's really the thing that helps me like settle into meditation. Then on top of that, like, I just naturally breathe now when I'm stressed, when I'm anxious, when I'm excited. Like, I just find myself taking a deep breath. And COVID really, really, really taught me how sacred breath is, how scary it is to not have that connection. So it's definitely something that is a foundational part of my magical practice and my practice with meditation and stuff. And I always recommend it, and I include it in a lot of the rituals that I write. And with Kink Coven too, we do that every single meditation. We have some breath work because I'm all about it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think whether it's just even conscious breathing or even holotropic breath work or pranayama, that, as far as I'm concerned, is like the best. I actually just got back to it in the last week, and it immediately like improved everything
Hmm.
because I hadn't been doing it for a long time. I mean, I teach it, but I hadn't been doing it, and it's phenomenal how potent it can, even just a little bit, can be. So I'm with you on that one.
Yeah.
I think of all the techniques in magic that the vast masses of humanity could benefit from the most. I think that's probably at the top of the list, even if they're
Me
not quote unquote
too.
magical people.
Me too. It's so powerful. I mean, like, even just the different, tattvas connected to the different elements. Like, it's such a simple technique, but I know for myself, I'm like, okay, well, I'm not feeling grounded, so let me do a square breath. Okay, like, my heart's hurting, I'm gonna do the water breath. Like, it's just it feels very resonant, and I feel like it's definitely saved me this past year and made me very, very thankful for my breath, which is, something good that came out of COVID, I guess.
It's also a great way to check in and be present
Mhm.
and conscious, which is
Yeah.
really hard to do, especially when
Hmm.
you're certainly, I think, as we will probably all experience, when your adrenaline's flowing and everything seems life or death all the time.
Yes, yes, exactly. I mean, yeah, it's funny. One of like my memories with my mom is like, when I was little, I had really bad insomnia, and she was like, take 3 deep breaths and you'll be able to go to sleep. And like, that was probably my one of my first introductions of breath work. It still works, but now, yeah, it's such a lifeline. And I think that, at least for me, like such a big part of my magical practice or my spiritual discipline is that checking in with myself. Like I think it's so easy to just not do that and to kind of just like everything is fine. I'm thinking of like that meme with like the dog with the burning house behind him. He's like, this is fine. Like, just kind of being willfully ignorant of the self. But like if you want to actually work effective magic, then you got to know where you are. And I think that, yeah, breath work is it's very gentle. I mean, obviously depending on the kind of breath work, like definitely done breath work where, it makes my hands cramp up and I kind of feel like I'm going to die, which is not my main go-to, but it really feels like a very embodied way to be honest with yourself, to see how you are. And I think that doing that and then figuring out what kind of ritual you need to do, what kind of practice you can lean into, like once you know how you're feeling, then it's going to be so much easier to really like ask yourself what you need and actually get an honest answer with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it should go before anything that people do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's a good point to segue into ritual, because you mentioned that also as something that is so important to your practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you mentioned kind of personal ritual, you mentioned group ritual with kink coven, and I'm just curious about that. Maybe if you want to talk about your approach to that, because you seem like you have a very creative and individualistic approach to it, which is always awesome to see, and I feel like we don't see it enough. So
Sure. Do you want to know like about like the rituals that I practice, kink coven specifically, rituals I write? I just want to make sure I'm answering your question.
yeah, just generally your approach to it,
Yeah.
and maybe all of the above.
Cool. So I definitely, for me, like magic, it's an art and a science, right? And for me, a big part of the way that I fit it into my life is creatively. Like it's, I feel people use this metaphor all the time. It's like any other skill, right? Like playing music or something. You got to learn all the notes. And then once you know the basics, you can write a song or whatever. I don't really play music, so I'm just kind of guessing here, but I know that's how it works. So for my own practice, it's definitely a mix of like traditional ceremonial rituals and then witchcraft and then my own kind of interests, which is for me what really aligns with my vision just in general. So I do the LBRP every day. I do my solar adorations. I do have those rituals I do, and that kind of acts as the framework for my daily practice. But then I have my daily ritual, which I've been meditating twice a day, so each one is kind of different. But I really just, I don't know. I think it. I kind of just. I'm sorry. This is such an involved question. I want to make sure I'm answering it. My brain is like trying to pick out the pieces. So yeah, I definitely think there's a time and place to do rituals that are kind of like egregores. I mean, LBRP, something like that, where it's been like so many people have been doing it. You're tapping into obviously something bigger than yourself. And my daily ritual doesn't really change that much. It involves tarot and meditation and breath work and journaling and some other stuff, prayer, that kind of thing. But then the rituals that I perform for the full moons or new moons, those, have a kind of a set structure. Like I'll usually do the LBRP again, or the hexagram, or the hexagram ritual. It's really funny. The more I get into ceremonial magic, the more that becomes the structure of my own rituals. But then I kind of think we were talking about this. Like I work with the Tree of Life a lot, and like a lot of the tarot keys and the Hebrew letters and intonation, and will kind of like customize my rituals based on my intention, based on whatever the sun and the moon are doing, and based on what I need and what feels aligned with where I am. And working with different faces of the divine feminine, and my devotion to goddess is probably the most central part of my magical practice. So a lot of my work will either be a lot of my rituals, I mean, I definitely manifest things, I think that's obviously important, but lately I felt like more so my rituals are a way to know myself more, or to feel energy in my body in a new way, or more devotional and less of like asking for things, less transactional, which I feel like is something that at least what that I've noticed in like mainstream witchcraft, like witchcraft and like women's magazines, which I write for, like, I don't know, it can kind of be like, oh, it's a new moon, so you have to manifest. And I'm just like, I definitely think there's a time and place for that. But I also think that, again, like introspection and self knowledge and just like energy work are really important just in general. So my own rituals are definitely, there's Kabbalah has become a very, very central part of my practice. So there's usually some kind of a, part of that that's in my rituals, but a lot of it has to do with my body and like embodiment and movement and like sex magic and that kind of thing, because I just am like not interested in rituals that are just cerebral. I'm not interested in magic that only fucking takes place in the brain. That is just not my thing. It just does not feel resonant for me. And like, I don't know. I'm trying to turn my whole life into like a devotional ritual to the goddess. And I'm trying to turn my whole life into magic. And for me, that means feeling it and not just thinking about it. So that's a lot. That's also part of the reason that I started Kink Coven, because I was like, I'm really interested in the overlap between embodiment and sexuality and witchcraft, and especially kink, and how if you're actually practicing BDSM, then it's very ritualized already. You're negotiating, you're creating a container. It's a power and energy exchange. There's a lot of energy being raised anyway. So, I missed my kinky community. So I co-created Kink Coven with my friend Sade D'Amour, who's an amazing professional switch here in LA as well. And it's partially because we wanted community and because we wanted to connect with each other, and also because the sex work community, sex workers are some of the most marginalized people, especially if, it's a sex worker who's trans and of color, like probably the most marginalized group. And I think that magic has to be something that makes the world a better place. And the idea of Kink Coven was both community and helping the community, and it's donation based. So all of the money that we raise goes to different organizations that support sex workers, and kind of like having that, monetary and energetic part together to me feels very important. So yeah, like that's been something that's been really, really fun for me. Like, I just am not interested at this point in my witch career and like leading just like basic ass rituals. Like, there's nothing wrong with leading just like a normal full moon ritual. There's plenty of people doing it, but like, I'm just not. It just doesn't feel good to me, and like, I have the luxury of saying no to things that don't really resonate. So it's been really fun to lead Kink Coven and to continue kind of exploring that intersection of magic and sensuality in a way that I hope is helping the world a little bit.
That's super cool. It was really interesting to hear you talk about devotion and shifting from transactional to devotional. And that's something that I've observed in a lot of magicians' lives, in my own life. And I think that is, for lack of a better way of putting it, is kind of the line that separates the kids from the adults in terms of people who, really become lifelong, whatever you want to call it, spiritual, they're seeking something bigger than themselves rather than the transactional approach, which is like great for about 3 months. But it's just pure ego. There's nothing there beyond. It's just another form of consumerism, really. And the best thing I think that can come of it is that people, I guess, are put at ease that they're actually doing something real. But then they have to ask the question, well, what now? And getting a bigger car is probably not the right answer to that. It should be about seeking something bigger than yourself. So that's really just something that's matched my own experience, and it seems to be part of the life cycle of people into this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, there's plenty of magicians who are, or occultists or witches who just, want to do it to feed the ego. And I definitely, like, I I have an ego. I definitely do my best to not live from that place. We all have that part of ourselves. But yeah, just, I think especially this past year, like I'm really very privileged. Like my life, my work didn't really change that much this year because I was already working from home. I was already working for myself. I was already writing my books. And I think especially seeing just how many people were struggling and seeing how many people struggled like this past year really reaffirmed like I'm not doing this just to get shit. Like listen, like especially if you're from like if you're not financially stable, like using magic to get to a place of like stability, hell yeah. Like using it as a way to get out of situations that are oppressive, hell yeah. Like that is, that's the history of magic. That's super important. But I'm just like, I'm not interested in using every new moon to manifest. Like I also don't need to. And I feel like if you're actually practicing magic and it's working, then like there comes a place where like, you kind of have what you need already, like you're like, oh, like these things are here. And like, I don't know, like all the synchronicities are just working, even if you're not doing a ritual to manifest. And it just, I don't know, it stopped feeling good. And I think a lot of my friends and the people that I talk to in this community are, yeah, definitely on the same page where it's something that brings us closer to our, higher self, holy guardian angel, spirit, goddess, God, each other, source. Like, I think that like, at the end of the day, to me, magic is love. And like, that is what I want it for, not so I can have $1 million. So like one day I do hope to have $1 million so I can give a shit ton of it away and stuff. But like, it just, that's never felt like the goal.
Yeah. And, of course, real love is non-transactional. That's kind of what defines love.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
You mentioned sex magic and taking a generally embodied approach to magic. And this is, of course, a perennial favorite topic of everybody and something that everyone is always interested in. So I'm curious what your take on that is, because you've written a lot about it. And yeah, I'm curious about that.
Sure. So for me, sex magic, I mean, TLDR, right? A way of working with sexual energy for a desired outcome or purpose. So, like, yeah, you can use sex magic to manifest, you can use it to banish, like, all of those things are obviously you can do it. And I really think that there's like, I think for me, the thing is like sexual energy is the energy of creation, right? Like, it is literally the energy of sustenance. It is what gives us life. So, obviously very, very potent for making things happen or manifesting or transforming. But I really am interested in sex magic as a way to like meet myself deeper, for a way as a way for me to meet the divine in different states of being and consciousness and through different realities, and also like as a way to be devoted to that energy. I mean, I'm a devotee of the goddess of love, so it like feel if it my relationship with sex magic really began through that lens, and though it's expanded past that, like engaging with my sexuality and honoring my own sexuality and practicing sex magic is like a way that I not only honor the goddess but embody that energy. So my perspective is definitely like more polytheist or pagan, I guess, with that. It's like not, it's obviously something that I do. I think that there's very few rituals in my eyes, or like very few spells that wouldn't that sex magic wouldn't support or help. And I think that that's why it's like it's very accessible. I mean, obviously, like there's plenty of people who don't want to engage in sex magic or ace, and like that is totally fine. But like again, if it's something that you're drawn to, like it can meet you wherever you are, and I think that's one of the really great things about it. And I always make the caveat like you don't have to be able to orgasm to practice sex magic. Like there are people who literally can't orgasm, and like it's all about raising the energy. So as long as you can do that, then you're good. I again like always aim for my work to be very inclusive. So that's always something that I include when I'm writing about sex magic. But like I've recently been super interested in really working on like using my breath and visualization to like move energy through my body in different ways and to engage with it in new ways. And like anything else, like, you could just masturbate and work with sex magic very easily, or you can make it like a whole ritual, right? Including different things. And I think that it's a really good way to to know yourself more deeply. I think for me, that's just like why I love magic so much. Like, obviously, it's fun and cool. And yeah, like you gotta go to different dimensions and like do cool spells and meet fun people. But like, I such a big pillar of my life is, you know, knowing myself and knowing thyself. And I think that being comfortable with your own sexuality and like your body and working with that energy is just such a potent way of deepening that and like deepening that kind of acceptance of where you are. And I think that it's just such a powerful tool that you can really weave in so many ways to your own practice. Like, yeah, my work, it's like very DIY in that sense, where I think it's really important for any magic practitioner to like engage with magic in a way that resonates with them, like your interests, your culture, where you are in your life. Like all of these things can, and in my opinion, should like make your magic fit you. It should be couture, right? It should fit to your life. And you know, we all have different sexual interests. We all have different ways of engaging with sexuality. And I think figuring out the ways that that resonates with you is just such a powerful addition to a magical practice.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, in my way of thinking about things, both sex and magic are about connection, which could be another way to say love, but just connection to, I think, as you were saying, so as you were putting it so well, connection to yourself at a deeper level, connection to other people, and it's the best way to learn about other people, which is therefore, in so doing, the best way to learn about yourself, and connection to the divine, for lack of a better way of putting it, the broader universe, whatever we want to call it. And sex and magic, let alone combined, are just perhaps the most potent ways we have of doing that, I think, and among the most potent. I've kind of made a conscious decision. I did make a conscious decision not to teach sex magic, because it's a little awkward and cringe to just teach it online. I mean, and particularly on the internet, particularly with our culture currently is so touchy, shall we say? And so I kind of stand by that. But that said, even though I don't, I don't teach it, I do think it's the most important part of magic in a way, right?
Yeah.
And so I kind of leave people to, I kind of point towards it and hope that people will discover it on their own, which is perhaps a better way to do it than having somebody guide you, just because it's so personal. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like too, it's like, I feel like if you've had an orgasm, like, that kind of like dissonance from reality where you feel bigger than yourself, right? Like it's, like, it when you feel it. If you know, and like, if you're already in a ritual setting, if you've already done magic, even if you've ever raised energy or you raised, a cone of power or whatever, you'll, any smart person will be able to be like, oh, okay, like I see that connection. And I mean, especially now, like we're in an age where there's so many books about it. There are so many people teaching it. And obviously, like, I'm like fucking throwing a hat into the ring. But yeah, I think that it's like one of those things that, and I always tell people to do it by themselves first. Like you have to, be comfortable with that part of yourself. Like if you want to engage with it in a meaningful way with anybody else. So, yeah, I get that decision. Obviously, I'm kind of on the other side of it, but I understand.
Yeah. And that's awesome. In Temple of Psychic Youth, the first ritual was, Temple of Psychic Youth started, it was all sex magic and just like straight into the deep end. And the first ritual was in detail writing down your ultimate sexual fantasy, which is hard, which is more difficult than it seems, right? Because it has to be like in perfect detail. And that's often, for a lot of people, a question they've never asked themselves. I'm always amazed, I was always amazed, particularly in LA, how afraid people are just to be by themselves.
Oh my God, yeah.
Let alone to introspect to what would seem like an obvious question to ask, but it's not an obvious question to ask for a lot of people.
Yeah. I just think that a lot, yeah, like, I mean, I feel like if this panini, pandemic, whatever you want to call it, has taught or has really showed me anything, it's that, yeah, people are very scared to be by themselves. And I mean, I know we've bonded over both being hermits. I'm like, I love my alone time. I need my alone time. I am my own best friend. I get very annoyed with myself sometimes, but I've always been somebody who's very, very um, comfortable being alone. I think maybe a lot of magical practitioners are kind of on that same path. But yeah, like knowing yourself, it's scary, and especially sexually. And, I think because being alone means there's a potential for being lonely. But with that, like the most powerful experiences I've had with sex magic and just with magic in general is at those periods of being lonely where I've had to be like, how can I give myself this thing that I want, that I'm lacking from other people? Like, how can I be there for myself? How can I be my own lover? And what are the things that I want to experience? And that was a huge catalyst, not only in my own explorations, but in my work. So, like, it's important. I think it's really important to be able to be alone, but it's definitely, I think it's very frightening for people to be honest with where they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's always been really surprising for me. Like, I remember going to, there's a sensory deprivation place in Pasadena called Just Float that I used to go to when I lived there. And I would go and people would tell me that, people would get in a sensory deprivation tank and they'd never been by themselves for more than 20 minutes, or even that much. Like, they'd never not been chattering away with a bunch of people around them. I mean, this is LA, so this is theater kids, so there's that. But that was really disturbing to me because I basically spent my whole life with my own thoughts. I think this is why they call it the Hermetic tradition. It's the tradition of hermits.
Yeah, so. Literally. That's absolutely, I cannot imagine. I'm like, I spend 20 minutes with somebody else. I'm like, I'm gonna go pee and I'm gonna go do some breath work on the toilet. Like, especially now, like, I feel like as I reintegrate to being with other people, like I definitely like, need to balance that with plenty of alone time. And I mean, I'm also a twin. So like I have been forced. I fucking love my sister Alex. Don't get angry at me for saying this. My whole life was forced to be around somebody else, like since the womb. I don't even have my own fucking birth chart. Sorry I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on here.
Yes,
but
you are.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so like, being my own person and taking time alone has always been very, very important to me. So I'm with you on that. I'm like, you don't like being alone? What the fuck is wrong with you? Like, that just, it just makes me sad. It makes me sad that people aren't comfortable with themselves in that way.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I think the earlier point you made about people kind of starting with their own desire first rather than, and getting really clear on that, because, sex is so often transactional in our culture. That's not necessarily bad. It's just that by transactional, I mean, people use it to emotionally manipulate or get things from other people or for covert reasons. And that's just human nature. There's nothing out of the ordinary about that. It's just how humans are. But because of this, people can go their whole lives never truly asking themselves what they want.
Yeah. What do I want? What do I like? Why am I doing these things? And like, yeah, it's it's like anything. I mean, people are going to be distracting themselves. If it's not sex, then it's like they're going to be numbing themselves with alcohol or social media. And like, I'm definitely guilty of these things. I'm not by any means a fucking saint, but I feel like that's why sex magic is so powerful, especially once you start like becoming aware of that energy within you. It's like, it's something that, at least for me, extends beyond just the realms of actually like engaging with sex magic. You're able to tap into this erotic energy in other ways and then work with that. And like, I don't know, I think that like it will lead you to other things that are fulfilling. Like I have definitely had like, orgasms in different energy centers in my body when I'm doing things like driving down the road and listening to music, or like sitting outside and under the sun, and finding that kind of connection to my sexual self outside of the realm of just sex magic, like empowers me and allows me to be more sovereign in that and to be more conscious about how I'm engaging with that with other people, and more able to give that to myself in different ways. So
yeah, that's awesome. It really seems to be it's hard to be dishonest in moments of ecstasy. Let me put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like with yourself. And I think for that reason, let alone the the fact that sexual ecstasy is the key to reproduction, is therefore the central aspect of our biological orgasm, excuse me, our biological organism, right, to be Reichian. It is the key to spirituality. It's the key to self-knowledge. I mean, what more potent key could there be? And that's why I think one of the many ways that magic, or one of the many reasons why magic is so appealing to people now, because all these religions have cut that off. They've done the opposite. They've done the evil thing, in my opinion, of telling people that sexuality is the impediment to their spiritual growth, which is the exact 180-degree opposite to the truth.
Exactly.
And that's why they're the Black Brotherhood, as Crowley put it. But sometimes I really think it's that simple, like that we don't need all the symbolic overhead of magic. I think just to make the clear point to people, just the very clear point is actually, sexuality on your own terms, not what somebody else tells you. That's critical. Sexuality on your own terms, and nobody else's. It's nobody else's business but your own and your partner's. That's the key to self-realization, not cutting it off. And I would have so many experiences with, like supposedly new age, supposedly pagan or supposedly new age or supposedly yoga groups, and they're all anti-sex. And something's wrong with that. I think there's something that there's a lot of self-deception and group deception going on in situations like that.
Absolutely. I honestly could not agree more. And, that's why I'm writing my sacred sex book, because I feel like it seems so obvious. I think that once you have that kind of like experience, whether it's alone or with somebody else or whatever, like it clicks. And, the Christian church, man, I don't even want to get into it, but like there's a reason that they cut that shit off. Like it is so powerful. And I mean, like it is seen in so many ancient traditions, and like it really is like, I just totally agree with what you're saying. And I think that a lot of the people who are new agey, who are sex negative or just horophobic on different levels, it just repackaged Christianity. You're literally just retaking that fear and selling it in a different way. I mean, like I think that what you were saying about sexuality on your own terms, like that is the key. But the only way to know what your own terms aren't to engage with yourself erotically. And I think that, a lot of these groups or religions are stopping you from doing that, because they know once you do that and once you connect with that part of your spirit, then it's like anything is possible. It's
they can't control you either.
Powerful force. Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know. I mean, just so, I'm just thinking of how fucked up like the church is. I mean, I don't even want to get into that, but I really definitely think that if everybody orgasmed more and engaged with themselves sexually in a way that felt resonant with their spirit, in a way that honored wherever they were and allowed it to be a spiritual experience, it would be a better world.
I completely agree. And I think that that can't be dialed up and communicated enough. And it's something that people continually need to hear. And I think that it is about being in touch with yourself, but it's also about, living a little and going out. One of the huge things that, I guess I'm technically a Zennial. I'm I was born in 81. So I'm kind of like on the cusp between Generation X and the millennials. So I'm in between. I remember when there was only broadcast TV and record players still before the internet. But one of the most devastating things about the millennial generation is they just grew up in this how do I put it, like Tupperware existence, where the entire goal of their parents was to keep them safe in a sanitized environment. Post 9/11, they were, including me, we were all told, if we ever had sex with anyone, we would immediately die of AIDS, which, by the way, was Anthony Fauci. That was his idea. So I'll say no more, other than that I'm convinced that this guy is just some type of, bizarre like latex and mask fetishist on a global level. But the millennials were raised to basically become hamster people, and they're not in touch with themselves. They're in touch with Reddit. I don't know what they're in touch with, but in not in all cases, but in many cases, and I think that prior generations, including the boomers, definitely were more wild. And I think that's really good for people. People need to live a little. They need to explore the wrong side of the tracks. They need to get their heart broken. They need to push themselves beyond what they thought they were capable of. And they need to not be safe.
Yeah.
And
I definitely feel that. I mean, I'm a millennial. I definitely, grew up somewhat like that, like definitely had a very privileged existence in a lot of ways, and I'm grateful for it. But yeah, I mean, like what do the kids do when you are over parenting? They're going to rebel, which, like you were saying, like I think that pushing against those boundaries and those edges is important. And like, I don't know, I'm thinking about like when I was like in my 20s and in college and was partying a lot and like drinking way more than I should, and just like that taught me so much about myself, and that taught me so much about my desires. And like my sexual awakenings weren't like at home just being like studying magic. It was being out in the world and like doing things I probably shouldn't have been doing. And I definitely see like a lot of people who are, especially like on the internet and social media and stuff, who are like, obviously magic and occultism, like it's a discipline, right? It's a practice. It requires study. But I'm like, if you're not living and if you're not taking this stuff into the world, then it's just going to be insular. It's just going to be in your own little hermetic bubble. And like, again, like I was saying before, like for me, like my goal is to become a walking vessel for the divine, for magic, right? So that when I interact with people, I'm able to be that kind of spark for them, so that especially people who might not necessarily quote unquote be awake, or like not really even be aware that there's another way of existing. And like, you have to live a life outside of just magic to be able to really like pave that way. And yeah, I definitely, I struggle. I mean, I really fantasize sometimes about like being like a Vestal virgin or something, and just like living in a temple and tending to goddess's altar and like just meditating all day. And that's the easy way out. It's so easy. I was just talking to my dad about this, who's a rabbi. I'm like, I like that kind of like monastic life is easy because there's no distractions, because the world isn't there to like make you do the work. There's no family to go back to and like actually see how much progress you made. But I think that living and pushing against those boundaries and knowing who you are in a setting outside of just like a magical context is only going to make your magic and your life better.
yeah, I completely agree. It's like, well, I always think of the formula of Babylon, not the ceremonial rituals and all of that. But, Crowley says there's two ways to communicate with Babylon. One is to do all these rituals and all that, but the other is the formula of Babylon, which is constant copulation upon all phenomenon at all times. It's just with your own experience. Magic in John Dee's time was called natural philosophy. It's just the study of the natural world. And that's how I see it. I don't do a whole lot of like high ceremonial anymore, although I've certainly have. For me, it's just the very keen study of the patterns of existence and attempting to live in accord with them. And what better way to understand that than through living, and sexuality is the most intensified form of it. The way that we learn the fastest, because you're merging it, however temporarily, with somebody else's universe, with somebody else's lived experience of this, whatever this thing is that we're all in. So you're sharing notes, even if you're sharing a lot of things, but one of the things you're sharing is notes, I think, at a very deep level. That's kind of how I see it. And it can't, I don't think that, but particularly approach consciously. And by consciously, I don't mean like doing some tacky New Age swingers ritual or something like that, although that can be fun too. But just consciously, as in approaching things as a magical act, you always come away from those experiences a larger person but having expanded your sense of awareness just by sharing the same space with another person for a short period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, I mean, I definitely have my rituals that I do every day. And, I like a fancy theatrical moment here and there. But yeah, for me, it's like, the other day I was like writing something and I burned it and I took a bath and it was like, I didn't really plan it. I was like, you know what? This is what I need. And like those simple rituals feel so sometimes even better than the ones that are like, I have to plan and study. And I think for me too, like I just am not, I don't want to say something negative about myself because I don't want to affirm that, but I am constantly learning to be better at like memorizing stuff. And like if I'm more worried about memorizing words or getting the words right, then like that is taking me out of the present. It's taking me out of my body. It's taking me out of the energy. So like I think that intuition is such an important part of magic and of letting it guide you. And that's how, to me, like you were saying, like you turn your whole day into a magical ritual. It's not just something that it's not just something that you do. It's like I always say, like being a witch isn't just when you're doing a spell. It's not when you're doing a ritual. It's a lens in which you are living your life. It's seeing that everything is energy. It's seeing the connectivity between you and the people that you interact with and the world and nature. And it is just such a more holistic way of living, right? Like it's not like you're only magic when you do magic. It's that like you take that with you and everything becomes a ritual, like washing your hands. I mean, that's why I think for me, like using the framework of the elements is so powerful. Like you were saying, like natural philosophy, like the elements have their own language, they have their own symbolism, they have their own energy, and they're in everything. So whether you're taking a walk or whether you're washing your hands or like lighting a candle or feeling the sun on your skin, there's this opportunity and invitation to engage with life in a deeper way. And like that is really like what interests me with magic. It's not so much of invoking things, and like obviously I love that, but it's a way for me to live more in alignment and devotion to what I believe in.
Yeah, that's so that's so well put. Just what I was thinking of as you were saying that and agreeing completely is I think if you do, anyone who's done even a bit of magic, in a serious way has probably had the experience, whether it's even just through a bit of synchronicity or a deeper flow state of feeling that the universe is alive and conscious and benevolent. Right.
Absolutely.
So for me, it's kind of like, well, once you get that, well, it's like, all right, well, game on, right? You just like throw yourself at it because it's going to catch you no matter what crazy shit you put yourself through, and that's kind of it. So it's I treat myself as a bit of a crash test dummy. I just throw myself at the walls of various unexpected corners of reality.
Yeah,
in
I
a, in a
definitely
in a
feel that.
living sense, not in a, oh, I'm doing some weird ritual from a book, but in a living sense, I constantly throw myself into new parts of the human experience that I never would have thought that I would have been engaged with, and I'm constantly seeking to expand my map of reality that way, and therefore understand more of whatever it is, this divine creation that we're in.
I feel that that's definitely something that I try to do, and I've definitely been like in a weird place. I don't know, the past month or so where I feel like my understanding of reality, I feel like like my reality is about to dissolve and reform in a new way, and I'm kind of just waiting for it to happen, which happens on occasion. So I'm just like leaning into it. But something that I am very aware of with the universe is that they, whatever, the universe at large has such a fucking sense of humor. It will laugh at you. It will laugh at you. The synchronicities that you experience once you become like what I consider like commit to being in like a conscious reciprocal relationship with the universe. Like once you decide to like, because I mean, it doesn't have to be a conscious decision, but like I really do think there is power in that. And like being like, I'm going to live aligned with the universe. I'm going to live like in, like you were saying, like seeing it as a living force that I have reciprocity with. Like I think it's such a powerful intention. But when you do that, gotta be ready for the lulls. Cause like there have been some times where I just like, you just have to laugh, like just like laughing at everything, like sometimes something is just like so good or so bad, but in like such a synchronous way that it's just like, this is just, I could not have made this up. Like I just feel God is laughing at me and pointing, and I'm like, okay, I'm laughing with you. This is really funny. So yeah, but it's fun. Like I think that's so important. I think that, yeah, seeing the universe as like a living entity also allows us to engage with the world, with each other, with ourselves, with nature, with more empathy and compassion, which I think is so important.
Yeah, I mean, what more do people need, or what do people need more now? What are they missing more than ever? Yeah, for me,
Yeah.
like everything you're describing, that is the goddess. It's like that that sense of the goddess winking or the goddess playing with you, like the Leela.
Yep. Yep.
And it's great. It's like what could be better than that in a way? And I love life. Magic has allowed me to expand my appreciation of life so much, and I just love life despite all the painful parts of it, which there's a lot, but that too, I mean, it's like you got to have your you got to eat your vegetables too sometimes, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I definitely feel that. And that's I've definitely been thinking about like the divine play of it all a lot. And I think that especially this past year, like I think that magic, like that the sense of wonder and the sense of play and the sense of just like joy is so important. I mean, I really, really believe that the thing that keeps us from being miserable adults is wonder and is play. Like if we lose that, like that is when you get the cranky assholes who are just mean for no reason. And like, I'm definitely an asshole here and there, but like I try not to be in one ways because I just think that play is so important. And I think magic is a way of engaging with that, right? It is the divine play. It is like a way for us to keep a sense of wonder by believing in something larger than themselves. Like, yeah. So one of my favorite quotes is from Grapes of Wrath, and all of them are caught in something larger than themselves. And like that's just it. That's just it. But we can surrender to it and like engage with it in a way that, makes us have at least has the illusion of allowing us some more control. If anything, at least it's allowing us a more sovereign perspective. And I feel like at least, that helps a little bit. But yeah, being able to laugh and being able to play and like I think it's so vital. And I think that if magic isn't fun, then why are you doing it? If it's not something that you like doing it, why are you doing it? Like I'm so I that just feels like that's just something I so believe in. Like, again, it's like anything. It takes work, yes. It's a practice, yes. It's a discipline, yes. But like if it's not adding to your life, if it's not making you a more compassionate person, if it's not bringing a sense of wonder and a sense of just like divinity into your life, then like why aren't you just watching sports or something? Like why are you here?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what could be better. I mean, this is why I've had the career that I've had. It's just people have lost religion, and that's probably a good thing because there's so many bad things about it. I think it is a good thing actually, but they're not getting their spiritual needs met anywhere else. Certainly not with Reddit atheism. So, which is just nonsensical. So it just happens to be, I think the reason why people are so interested in magic is because there just happens to be this, kind of wacky thing, this artifact from the past that we can revitalize and make new and make ours again. That's actually a set of practices that don't require you to believe things that aren't true, or more critically, surrender your autonomy to somebody else, which I think is the key to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And yeah, I mean, I know that's really resonant with me. I mean, I grew up in temple with Judaism and kind of had it shoved down my throat, and it was horrible. It was honestly a vaguely traumatic experience for me to go through that. And like I mean that's not even engaging with Christianity, which has its own horrible set of, dogma and stuff. And I think that people finding their own spiritual practices is just it's life changing. It really like there's no way for it not to be. And I definitely think that like believing in something and some kind of divinity is very powerful. Like I consider myself religious because I pray to my gods and goddesses multiple times a day and like I'm very devout, but it's not there's no dogma. It's just like my own beliefs. And I think that yeah, that being able to engage with the spiritual practice in a way that's like non-judgmental is so important. And I think that's also part of the reason that like I'm not one who's like joined orders or been initiated by other people, because like I it doesn't feel resonant with my own beliefs of, my own path of being in control of myself. And any kind of hierarchy with magic in that way is just something that takes me out of uh the sacredness of it.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, maybe just to bring it down a notch, how did, or up maybe, how did you decide to embark on this professionally? Because I know from, I know from personal experience, that's a really kind of insane thing to do. And it takes a lot of courage and takes, I think, the understanding that you're sacrificing your brand, you're branding yourself that person permanently, and you have to sacrifice a lot, a lot of potential options in order to do that. So how did you, but you seem to have, you just went straight for it. So, how did you make that decision? What led you to do that?
Okay, so this is a two-part question. First off, I have always been aware, I realized at a very young age that I felt different from other people, and that I had two options: that I could either spend my life trying to be like other people and be miserable, or I could just say fuck it and do my own thing. And my Aquarius self picked that option. So I did not set out to be a cult or professional witch in the way that I am now. I actually went to college for fashion writing and fashion journalism. I had a fashion blog for many, many years. And I started my fashion blog around the time that I started really engaging with witchcraft. And I grew up in the Bible Belt. I grew up in Georgia. It was I discovered witchcraft when I was 12 or 13, right before I went through my bat mitzvah. And it was really lonely and very isolating. And, I didn't really have a community, but when I was in college, I guess, I had my fashion blog, RIP Breathing Fashion. And I started writing about witchcraft, and I started doing a series of outfit posts on my blog inspired by tarot cards, where I would make an outfit based on the wild unknown tarot cards and take photos, with a photographer named Mary DiCrescenzio, who's really sweet. And she's very devout Christian, but we were able to like really kind of see the God in one another, and like engage with this kind of esoteric thing in a way that felt really resonant. And I think we did around like 9 cards, and I wrote about it. And when I was in college, I was, studying I thought I was going to like move to New York and work for a fashion magazine. That was the trajectory that I was expecting myself to be on. And I like was in a business class and had to write a cover letter. Fucking cover letters suck ass, man. Anyway, I had to write one for I wrote it to an editor that I really liked at Nylon magazine, and just like actually sent it to her and was like, listen, I'm graduating, I would love to talk to you about my work. At that time I'd already written for different publications and had some internships, and had started doing journalism. But she pretty much said that they didn't have any staff positions, but would I want to freelance for them. So I started writing about witchcraft for them. I think my first piece for them was like how to make your wardrobe witchier. So I talked about glamour magic and incorporating sigils and stones and different colors and correspondences into your clothing as a way to engage with glamour magic. And just kept writing for them. And like, that was the one byline I needed to get other bylines. So I started, I think actually before that, I had Vice's then feminist vertical called Broadly reach out to me, and ask me to write about the winter solstice. So that came to me, and then I started, once I wrote for Nylon, I started writing for other magazines, and still was kind of just like doing it as like a freelance thing. And about 5 years ago, I was graduated college, was convinced I was going to move to New York City, and landed an internship with Vivienne Westwood out in LA, and decided to move here for it. And I was there for a while, and then ended up at Hello Giggles as a staff writer, and kept writing about witchcraft, kept freelancing about it. I've always since since I started Instagram like 10 years ago, I've always been somebody who's like out of the broom closet. I'm very open with my beliefs with witchcraft and have always posted about tarot and what I believe in, and was still doing that and still writing about witchcraft on my social media pages. And I was writing at Hello Giggles, and I actually was approached by a publisher on Twitter from eBerry, which is a Penguin Random House imprint based in London. And they asked me if I'd want to write a book about witchcraft. And at that time, I had been writing my column with Nylon Magazine called Ask a Witch, which is exactly what it sounds like. And I would just answer people's questions about witchcraft every month. And literally, like, and this is like why this is one of the reasons that, I was like, Goddess will literally laugh at you. Like, I had been driving to work and I was driving downtown, and like, people would DM me their questions. And one question that I always got from my column was like, what books do you recommend about witchcraft? And that morning, I remember being like, people ask me this all the damn time. Like, I could write a book about this. And yeah, I kid you not, I got a DM that day asking if I'd want to write a book about witchcraft. And a couple months before, this was, I can't do math, like 4.5 years ago, I was like pretty sure I wanted to quit writing about witchcraft. It was so oversaturated. I felt like everybody was doing it. It was like every magazine was writing about it. And I was like, you know what? I'm kind of tired of this. I'm just going to write about menswear. I was like, there's not enough women writing about menswear. I think I'm just going to pivot and do that. And like literally like a week or two later, I get this DM and I was like, yeah, sure. And got an agent and then did that. And I'm just really lucky that it's been something that has been very effortless, honestly. Like, that happened, and then my book was published by in the US it's called in the UK it's called Craft, but the publisher that published it here, Tarcher Parages, they've published all my other books, and they're really, really great publishing house, and it's everybody on the team is women, and it's just like they really support me and come to me with projects. And yeah, it's not really something that I just, you know what, I have a lot, like you were saying, like I have a lot of faith in the universe. I trust it. I trust her. Like, I know that the path that's meant for me is going to open for me. And like, I think just allowing myself to follow that has been why I am where I am. I mean, obviously a lot of work, and yeah, it was really hard for a few years. Like, between my first and second book coming out, I was working as a staff writer and kind of like got demoted / fired, and then had to figure out how to work for myself. But that was one of the best things to ever happen to me, because working for myself is like one of the greatest joys of my life. And I'm not a good employee. I'm not really meant to work for anybody else. I will take too long of a lunch break, and I'll talk too much. And like, I just like, I don't know, success to me is being able to do what I want to do, and making, enough money to support myself while doing it. And it definitely took some time, and I have some way to go, but yeah, it's been really, it's something I'm grateful for every day. I never ever take writing about this stuff for granted. It's like, especially somebody who's Jewish, like my ancestors were killed for even talking about what they believed in. So it's something I have a lot of gratitude for.
Awesome. Well, if people want to find out more about you and your work, where should they go in terms of maybe first book website or first books to start with? So
my website is GabrielaHerstik.com. GabrielaHerstik.com. You can find my ritual guides there, link to all my books, other info about myself, and then you can find my books wherever books are sold. You can just Google my name and it'll come up on Penguin's page. But I have all my links and stuff on my social media. So, and I have a Patreon where I do like Q&As, and we're starting a sex magic discussion circle next month, and I put tarot spreads and ritual guides for a little bit cheaper on there. And that is also so that Patreon, Instagram, and Twitter are all Gabby Herstik, GabyHerstik. And then, yeah, Kink Coven stuff is kinkcoven.love. Yeah, you can find my books wherever. Go to your local bookstore, though. That's always my suggestion.
Awesome. And you mentioned you might be getting back to leading groups or teaching classes.
yeah, I'll eventually, I'm like starting to teach classes again. And you can find all that on my social media and my website.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. That was really great.
Yay, thanks for having me.
Awesome.